Welcome to the fantastic reading of Princess Celestia by your great and powerful, beloved Aizka. Today, we will be beginning Part 7, or Chapter 7. You could call it whichever you like, but it is what we will be reading today. So, without further ado, I present Princess Molestia, Chapter 7. Oh, my stars, Applejack whispered, finally coming to as she slowly opened her eyes. Her mind was still foggy and her eyes were hazed, yet she was able to make out that she was in Fluttershy's cottage. She felt around, and first recognized that her right legs were against the soft cushions of a couch. However, her right legs were feeling something different. As she looked down to investigate, all the memories of the past couple hours suddenly rushed back into her head. Gah! She cried as she quickly hopped off of her brother, falling over one of the arms of the couch and hitting a wall. She rubbed the back of her head with her hoof as she swore under her breath. Looking up after a moment, she was able to see Big Macintosh begin to rustle on the couch. Lordy. Come on, you big lump, Applejack complained as she trotted over and began to nudge her brother. Slowly but surely, Big Macintosh came to as well. Huh? AJ, what are... His eyes suddenly sprung open. All of the memories of the past couple hours now invaded his mind as well. He jumped up and fell off the other end of the couch, hitting his head on the opposite wall. Gosh, Mac, you're gonna hurt yourself like that. I know, but, we're still in Fluttershy's home. Does that mean... Yeah, I think it all really happened. Applejack blushed lightly and looked down for a moment and raised her head to look at Big Mac. Brother... Yes, sis, he responded, his voice low and slow from him being a bit of a deep thought. Back earlier, when Celestia was here, did you, her blush intensified as the knot formed in her throat. Did we, do the tussle? Big Mac was silent for a few moments as he attempted to recollect his thoughts further, but it all drew to one conclusion. Yep. Dag nabbit, Applejack swore under her breath, now kicking her hooves against the floor. I'm sorry, big brother. AJ, we can discuss this sort of thing later, he said, finally standing up straight. Right now, we gotta try to find the others. I reckon maybe needing our help. You're right. Sorry. She looked around, making sure the place was completely empty. They ought to be at the Crusaders clubhouse by now, so let's get going, quick. Big Macintosh nodded his head in reply, and in only a few seconds they both were racing out the door. Even though it was dark, they both were very familiar with the parts they had to travel, and their night eyes, which would come in after about a few minutes, would make it clearer. They knew that they may not even be there anymore, but it was the only lead they had. They had to try. Fluttershy, darling, are you all right? Rarity quickly pushed at the side of the sleeping Pegasus, hoping to wake her up. After a few unsuccessful tries, she then drew out a piece of hay from the roof they were on, and tickled it against Fluttershy's nose. After a few seconds, Fluttershy began to cringe and gave out a small and graceful sneeze. What? Fluttershy groaned, leaning up in a still groggy state. Rarity? It's all right, Fluttershy. I'm here for you. Where am I? As Fluttershy looked around, the realization of where she was, and more importantly why she was there, finally hit her. She quickly sprang up into a light her after a loud squeak. That doesn't make any sense. And began to look around nervously. Oh my gosh, is Celestia still here? I thought she... Oh, Rarity! Fluttershy quickly embraced Rarity in a big, warm hug. Rarity... What? There's no quotation marks. Rarity, I'm so glad you're okay. Celestia didn't hurt you, did she? I'm so sorry I couldn't help you. It's all right, really, Rarity replied with a soft chuckle. I'm fine. But when I was on my way to your place, I saw you being vandalized by Celestia almost directly above me. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything to help, but as soon as she left, I did my best to hurry up here and make sure you were all right. You are all right, aren't you? Oh, yes, I suppose so. But, Rarity, we have to get back to the others. I mean, It's about Celestia. It's important that I tell them. You're right, we should, but what's so important for you to tell the others? Celestia, she told me things. But we need to get to the others first. I mean, it's more important for them to all know, really. It's all right, dearie, I hear you. Come on, let's get out of this rooftop and get to wherever they are now. Aren't they still at your cabin? Oh, no. They're at the Crusaders Clubhouse. We should hurry over there, though. Right behind you, but, a little help off this roof first? Rarity grinned sheepishly. Oh, right. Sorry. Fluttershy replied as she wrapped her arms around Rarity, careful not to interfere with her mane, and carried her off to the roof onto the main street. With that, they both began a speedy trot towards the CMC's clubhouse. Princess Luna! Twilight cried out as she rushed out of the treehouse and towards Luna. What's the matter, Twilight? Well, Rainbow Dash said that you found me using a letter with a locator spell on it. Right? Yes, that's correct. Luna tilted her head in confusion. Twilight, you look shaken. What's wrong? Oh, well, I just happened to receive another letter, and I don't think it's from you. Twilight gulped as she levitated the letter in question in front of Luna, who only examined it for a moment before she too realized what this meant. Oh no. She's coming. Luna turned to Trixie and the guards. She's coming. Princess Celestia is on her way here right now. Already? Trixie gasped lightly. But Trixie hasn't had the time to form the spell, and... Then get on it, Silver Shield barked. Trixie, go hide in those bushes over there, he commanded as he waved his hoof around. Guard Squad A, over there, B in that area, and C up to those trees. If Celestia tries to escape or gets too dangerous, we'll have to try to detain her. Sir, replied all of the guards as they quickly moved to their positions. Trixie, get into that pile of bushes with Luna and begin working on the spell. If you run into any trouble, Luna will be able to keep you safe. Oh, wait. I was speaking as Twilight Sparkle. Oh, well. It doesn't matter. That was Silver Shield saying that. All right, then, Trixie stammered slightly. The great and powerful Trixie will get to work straight away. Her and Luna quickly dove into the bushes. Again, with the no quotation marks. Into the bushes as Trixie immediately set to work on beginning the spell. It was a tricky cast, she knew, but something that shouldn't be too hard or take too long to prepare. You two, Silver Shield pointed at Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash. You both get into the clubhouse and keep your 3 younger fillies and baby dragons safe. Do not come out for any reason. Right, on it, Rainbow Dash replied, nudging Pinkie Pie slightly as she began to head into the treehouse. Pinkie Pie looked back at Twilight for a moment before she too went inside, closing the door behind her. Twilight Sparkle, Silver Shield said calmly as he approached Twilight. Do you understand what it is that needs to be done? I understand, she replied softly with a bit of fear in her voice. It's just, I think my first time was going to be a more pleasant one. That's gotta suck for Twilight Sparkle. I can't even imagine it. No sacrifice, no victory. In time, you will learn these words to be one of life's great truths. I know this will be hard for you, but remember what and who you're doing it for. Right, she replied with a nod. I won't let any pony down. With that, Silver Shield himself retreated into the same bundle of bushes that Trixie and Luna were in, huddled down and out of sight. Trixie still had a while before the spell would be prepared, yet it was coming gradually, making headway. There Twilight stood, in the center of the circle of trees. The treehouse was barely visible from where she stood, and yet she could faintly see 2 pairs of eyes peeking out the window. She looked around more, and saw that the guards had concealed themselves in the brush very well, only able to identify their positions by having seen exactly where they went. As she took a large breath and exhaled, she realized just how silent and calm it was out there. This, however, did not last, as the distant sound of flopping wings became noticeable. Twilight stood perfectly still, her ears perked up as she listened to the sound gradually become louder. She looked up in the sky, still seeing nothing, yet the sound grew even louder still. It was starting to become maddening, like knowing a certain sort of impending doom was coming, yet having to wait for it with bated breath. Louder the noise became, and when the source seemed to be just beyond the closest few trees, it stopped. Dead silence took over as Twilight could barely breathe as she listened closely, wondering why the wing flaps have stopped. Twilight sparkle, Twilight suddenly heard. As she turned around, she was just able to see Princess Celestia float down from above the trees and land before her, perhaps 5 feet away. Celestia! Tonight, she said in a low yet rough tone while making a step forward. You. She continued to slowly trot forward, drawing closer to a now frightened Twilight. Me? What, Princess? Twilight couldn't help but begin to choke up in her throat. Now that Celestia drew closer, Twilight could see the sweat beginning to drop from her face and the drool forming at her lower lip. Celestia's grin was also there, growing wider with each step taken as her beady eyes did its work to their gaze connected with Twilight's. I'm going to have you, Twilight Sparkle, Celestia continued. Oh, my star pupil. You don't know how long I've yearned to feel that luscious lavender body of yours. Celestia could visible see Twilight gulping hard as her eyes also grew larger. My what? Twilight's body almost completely froze. The only movement she had left allowed her to sit back on her haunches and lean back as Celestia only stepped closer and closer. Oh, I just got a wonderful idea. Celestia was now in front of Twilight, their hooves almost touching as Celestia towered over her. I know how much you love reading, and how books are practically half the world to you. However, tonight, I'm going to teach you something you can't learn in a book. No, Princess, please, no, you don't, I don't want to. Before Twilight could react, Celestia had leaned down and planted a full, hearty kiss on her lips. Celestia's tongue immediately darted inside Twilight after just a moment into the kiss, as her body suddenly came upon Twilight's. Celestia's front hooves pushed back Twilight's front hooves, sending her onto her back with her haunches sprawled out. While Celestia's back hooves were on either side of Twilight's body, her tail was swung downwards, feeling around in between her thighs while keeping her rear legs spread out widely. Celestia's kiss deepened, her tongue lapping around inside Twilight's mouth hungrily, furiously, as if it were lavishing against the most delicious treat it had ever tasted. Her body pressed down against Twilight's, her front hooves keeping Twilight spread outward like their bellies and chests pressed together firmly. Celestia's mane came down and began to swirl against Twilight's horn, stroking and squeezing it as the light magic that constantly flowed through the colorful hairs seemed to react slightly with the horn, sending light pulses into Twilight's body. The rhythm started by the horn soon spread to Celestia's tongue swirling around, followed by her main body, and lastly her tail. Celestia's tongue flicked and pushed in as deep as it could, partially going down Twilight's throat a few times while it forcefully batted around Twilight's tongue. Celestia's body was pulsing and grinding against Twilight's, her inner haunches now being rubbed against by Twilight's hooves as the area between their bodies grew hot. Celestia's tail was working on 3 things at once, not only keeping Twilight's rear leg spread open, but also rubbing itself down against her lower body and her rump. It would also occasionally slide up one of her inner thighs at times, but would quickly return down and continue timing its strokes in unison with the main pulsing rhythm. To say Twilight's mind was scrambled would have been a devastating understatement. One side, she was telling herself that she must do this in order to save her friends, her mentor, and possibly all of Equestria. On another, she's in a state of complete shock and awe at the fact that this really is Celestia on top of her, right now, servicing her in a way only a married couple should. Another side is considering just passing out and letting Celestia have her and not feel what's going on. The last side is in deep shock, almost causing her to break into tears as the fears of the powerful goddess just may be too much for her smaller body to handle. And that much may physically break. Twice. As all these thoughts clash, her mental process is constantly being smacked around, shaken, and stirred by the overwhelming sensations passing through her body. She can't explain why or how, but past all the fear and anguish, past the desire to get away from the need of the comfort of home, this all somehow sort of feels good. But there wasn't any more time to focus on lingering thoughts, not for longer. For after only a minute of Celestia's domination of the lavender unicorn, she suddenly adjusted her technique. Celestia broke away from the kiss, giving Twilight's face a large lick before she slid her head down, starting to lick and nip at her chest. However, as she did this, her horn lowered down enough for it to make contact with Twilight's. To add to this, the rhythmic pulsing and grinding of their bodies had intensified, rubbing their horns together in a perpendicular direction. From this direct contact, Celestia's magic began to directly slide into Twilight's horn and through her body, forcing her nerves to go haywire and make every sensation translate into pure pleasure. Within moments, Twilight was moaning out loudly, her muscles were beginning spasm, and her horn was giving off a magical discharge. Unable to control herself further, Twilight's legs gripped against Celestia's body as tight as they could, and Twilight even began to push back and meet with Celestia's pace. Their bodies were pulsing and grinding together in a hot, lustful embrace. Their horns were connected and freely exchanging magic, locking their minds and spirits together in unison as the pleasure swept over them both. The magic flowing into Twilight's body was intense, and even for Celestia it was beginning to take its toll. It was not so much the amount of magic, but it was the use of magic coupled with the intensity of the situation that soon began to wear her down, causing her to sweat and pant heavily while her and Twilight serviced one another. This fatigue was also being noticed by a third party. "Do you see that?" Luna whispered to Trixie and Silvershield. I think Celestia is starting to get tired. It would seem that Celestia is now fully indulging herself on this, Silvershield whispered back. "This is good. It means that she will tire more quickly and that we can end this mayhem soon." "Right. I hate having to see Twilight Sparkle go through this, but..." Luna let out a soft sigh and lowered her head. "If the result would be the same, I would have given myself up in her place." "Do not take things so hard on yourself, Princess Luna. You had no control over this happening." "Right. No control." Luna closed her eyes and sighed again, thinking of herself for a few moments before opening her eyes again. "Is the spell almost ready, Trixie?" Luna asked as she turned her head to face the unicorn. Trixie? Trixie did not respond, for her attention was already fixated on the scene before them. Her eyes were open wide, and her cheeks were flushed red with a great blush as she watched the shameless acts play out before her. Even though she seemed to have the spell ready and fixed up in her horn, which glowed softly, her mind was put in a trance by the display. She was sweating some, and her breathing was heavy with warm breath. She was planted back on her haunches, sitting straight up with her left hoof slid in between her legs and stroking up and down rapidly between her thighs. When there was a heavy moan from Twilight or Celestia, Trixie would give off her own little squeal as she seemed to push against herself harder. "Miss Trixie," Luna blurted out in a raised whisper, "what are you doing?" "What? Oh!" Trixie suddenly snapped back to the reality as she pulled her hoof away from herself. Trixie was, she was just, never mind. She has a spell ready. Whenever you need it, Princess, just... She turned her head in a vain attempt to hide her growing blush. "Just please let Trixie know when you want her to cast it." "That moment may be coming up very soon," Silvershield pointed out as he leaned closer towards the scene. It was now clearly visible that Celestia's movements were getting sloppy and becoming uncoordinated. Her fatigue was not starting to take its toll. I don't get it. "All right, Trixie. Are you prepared to cast?" Luna asked as she looked once more to the unicorn. "Yes. Trixie is ready to do this." "All right. Silvershield, on your command." "Affirmative. Stand ready." Silvershield began to slowly raise up his right hoof. Celestia was now barely able to stand as both her and Twilight were drenched in sweat. "Prepare the direction of your magic." Silvershield's right hoof drew higher as Trixie began to tilt her head downwards, aiming her horn towards Celestia. Celestia's majestic mane and tail finally seemed to slump down, the control and fluidity they had now dying off and just falling freely as if composed of normal hair. "Ready?" Silvershield's right hoof was now straight up. His eyes squinted as he focused straight in front of them. Trixie's horn glowed brighter. Glowed? I don't know. Is glowed a word? Glue? Glue brighter. The spell that had been configured earlier ready to be unleashed on command. Finally, Celestia's legs could no longer support herself or her overextended state as her entire body came down. Her body lay directly next to Twilight's, with most of it leaning on the lavender unicorn. Celestia's hooves and hair still draped around her. "Fire!" Silvershield finally shouted, followed quickly by a large magical outburst from Trixie's horn, as the spell was cast and shot straight toward Celestia. The spell hit its target, connecting with Celestia's forehead and just below her horn. End Part 7.